my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up, and it actually was a really good reading month for me. I didn't expect to read this many books, but I ended up with 11. I know, that's a lot more than I usually read. I usually read about 4 to 8 a month and not 11. So with these 11 books, I have read 87 books this year. My original Goodreads goal was 35. I passed that way early in summer. Now I'm hoping to maybe get to 100 books by the end of the year. I think I can do it. Hopefully I can. But without further ado, let's get into this wrap-up. Okay, first book I read in September was Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding. Most of you have heard of the movie. It's about Bridget Jones, obviously, who is a 30-something singleton in London, and she is trying to figure out life, and she has this goal weight she wants to get to. She wants to quit smoking, she wants to, it's all these goals that she writes, and this is basically her diary. I adore the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It's that movie I watch anytime it's a stormy day outside or you just are hanging out at home. That's my go-to movie. And so I decided to pick this up when I saw it at the used bookstore for fairly cheap. I gave it a 5 stars. I liked it. It was still funny. The first part was a little bit boring as I got used to reading a diary entry. It was kind of weird at first, but I really enjoyed it. And the only weird thing for me was she kept talking about how obese she was and how massive she was, and I'm wondering if this was kind of a comment on self-esteem, because she was only 130 pounds, which is pretty thin. So that was kind of a weird part for me, and I really liked, though, the development throughout the story and her and Mr. Darcy, because of course it reminds me of Pride and Prejudice, which is one of my all-time favorite classics. So yeah, gave this one a 5 stars on Goodreads. Okay, my second read of September was actually from NetGalley, so it doesn't come out until 2019. It is Ragnarok Unwound, which is about a girl who finds out she is a fate cipher, which this is Norse mythology, and she basically can alter people's fates, play with the different strings of their fate, that sort of thing. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, but there were a lot of issues with the galley, and the first third of the book was pretty bad. It kept jumping around. I couldn't focus on what was going on. It was really confusing. But by the end, and thinking back on it more, I did enjoy it, and I hope that the final copy that comes out next year is a little bit cleaner, makes a little bit more sense, because I love Norse mythology, and it focused on Loki and Loki's children, so that was a cool read, but get past the first third. That's my only advice on that one. Okay, the third book I read this month, I heard a lot about it on BookTube around 2014. It's The Merciless, which I got in the Barnes & Noble 50% off sale that was happening at the beginning of September. Didn't know much about it, thought it would be a little creepy, maybe. Knew there was some sacrifice, and some people compared it to Mean Girls, which definitely it is. It's about a girl, her name's Sophie. She moves to this new town with her mom, who's in the army, so they move around a lot, and she helps take care of her grandmother who's had a stroke, but she gets taken in by the popular girls at school, and it just goes downhill from there. It's very twisted, it's very dark, it's definitely appropriate for the Halloween season, but I wasn't sure what to expect when I opened it and said for mature audiences only. I understand now that I've read it. One of the weirdest books I've read this year, for sure. I would not give this to small children at all. There's sacrifice, there's exorcisms, there's animal mutilation, there's a lot going on, but if you want a book that goes really fast and creeps you out, and I read this in a single afternoon, it's a little over 200 pages I think, and there's a bonus during that, almost 300 pages. So yeah, I read this one. Creepy book. You'll wonder why you're reading it throughout. But I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. Okay, fourth book I read this month was another one I got approved from NetGalley for Hachette. I was the publisher. And that is Fierce Fairytales. Poems and Stories to Stir Your Soul. And this one, I wasn't sure what to expect because it's a feminist retelling of Fairytales, and there's some essays and some illustrations throughout, and I was a little worried it was going to attack the Fairytales and kind of butcher them, but it ended up being beautiful, and each poem was so engrossing, and it's the first poems I've read since college, which back then I was reading Giacomo Leopardi, which if you're interested in really dark poetry, I recommend him. He's an Italian poet. But this was just really entrancing. I'd love to give it to like a 12-year-old to like somebody my age, because it goes through anything from neglect in your family, growing up, feeling insecure, how to be a good person, what's okay for other people, what's not. It covered so much, and it's one of those books that I would love to give like my younger cousins as they grow up and turn like 12 to 15. It's great. I think each story and each poem, they have something that everyone could connect with. I didn't love every single poem throughout. There were certain ones that just clicked with something I've gone through in my life at one point or another, or things that I maybe haven't gone through yet, and just going through it, you feel yourself connecting to it really well, and I loved that part of it. So definitely go check this one out. It came out last month, so it's really good. Okay, the 5th book I read this month. So it is City of Lies, which was the pick for Name of the Book, which is the book club run by Little Book Owl and Pierre Ford and Jean and all the you-know-who. So I picked this one up because I was finally going to participate, and yeah. So what this one is about is it follows, each chapter is told alternating between a brother Joven and Kalina the sister, and they are from a family that are the food tasters for the counselor of their city. And Kalina was supposed to take over from their uncle, but she was too sickly to do it, so her younger brother Joven took over. And in the beginning of the book you see that she is kind of ill, and Joven and the counselor's nephew come back to the city, and everyone's surprised to see them early. And immediately after, the counselor and his food taster, their uncle, get poisoned and are killed. And then the city's under siege, and it's this whole big thing. It sounds really exciting, right? This book was very, very slow. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, but there's not a lot of adventure. There's not a lot of epic fight scenes. It's very drawn out. It's very political. It's a lot of focusing on what's happening inside the characters' heads rather than the action that's happening around them. And I wasn't a huge fan of the romance in this one. I didn't hate it, but I would have been fine if it hadn't happened. And the 2 characters that we follow, Joven and Kalina, I preferred the events that happened in Kalina's chapters, but they were so similar. If you didn't have the header at the beginning of the chapter telling me who it was, I wouldn't know, because their thoughts are really similar, their actions are really similar. It's just, there's not enough to differentiate them, where if I was given a paragraph, I would instantly know who I was reading about. So that kind of bothered me. But other than that, it was a pretty good book if you like slower reads and can get through them. It's supposed to be a series. This wrapped up pretty well though, so I'm not really sure what book 2 is going to be about. Yeah, but I do recommend this one, but not if you have a very small attention span. One thing a lot of people liked was the rep Joven, I think, is OCD, which was kind of interesting to read about because I'd never encountered a character with OCD. So if you want to check this one out, just be prepared. It is slow. The first 2 to 3 chapters I think are really, really long and hard to get through. After that it got a little bit easier, and towards the end I did start skimming because there was like too much explanation of certain things. But I definitely recommend that you pick this one up. Okay, the 6th book I read this month was also a NetGalley pick. It is The Dinosaur Artist, and it says Obsession, Betrayal, and the Quest for Earth's Ultimate Trophy. So this one is about a fossil collector. He collects fossils and sells them, and it's paleontology as a hobby rather than academic. And it follows this whole case where was the skeleton that he presented and sold for massive amounts of money? Was it legally acquired? Should it be sold? And that sort of thing. If you're interested in paleontology, I totally recommend this one. And if you're interested in the cases behind should it or should it not be sold, I wasn't the right audience for this one. I still gave it 4 stars. But a lot of this was background for me. It was repeat. I learned a lot about it. I was obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid. I went to school in Montana, so that a lot of this stuff gets covered there too. And it just was repetitive. But if you really like dinosaurs and are super into it already, want to get into it, this is a really great primer. If you know somebody that's really into dinosaurs and you just want to understand what they're saying sometimes in paleontology, this is pretty good at giving you like a historical background and understanding terms and getting into the field, rather than trying to open up a really complex book that's gonna just confuse the hell out of you. Totally recommend picking this one up. It's pretty good. I just was a little bit bored because it was really repetitive from things I already knew. But if you're new to this, then definitely check this one out. It's really great. I don't know if younger kids would be able to understand, but definitely teenagers and older. Okay, so the 7th book, of course, another NetGalley. I read so many NetGalley books. I've been approved for 18, I think, and I've read 5 or 6 now. And this one I was so excited. I didn't think I was going to get it, and I did. It was The Darkest Star. Let's see if I can get that to focus. By Jennifer L. Armentrout, which this is the first book in her Origin series, which is the spin-off of, if you remember a long time ago, she wrote the Lux series, which was 5 books, started with Obsidian. I absolutely love that book. It's basically Twilight with aliens. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. It's fun, it's weird. Kat is a book blogger, and Damon is, he's basically alien Edward from Twilight, but less annoying. So I really liked those books. This one happens after those, so I've only read the first 3 of the Lux books, so I missed some things from books 4 and 5. A little lost sometimes, but overall, really loved this one. I can't go into too much because I can't post a review until 2 weeks before publication day, and this comes out October 30th, so in about a week and a half I can put up my review. But this follows Luke and Evie. They're 2 characters that you've technically met before, but this is their story after the events of the previous one, and as I say, I loved this book. It was very nostalgic of my love for YA, and kind of cheesy and funny, and sometimes you just click with an author and their humor makes so much sense to you, and it's 10 times funnier than anybody else's humor. That's Jennifer L. Armentrout for me. Anytime I read her books, I'm laughing so much. So if you are interested, I highly recommend checking it out. And I will be posting a full review up on the blog about 2 weeks before it comes out, so be on the lookout for that one. Okay, the 8th book I read this month, I technically listened to it as an audiobook, and I had the Kindle, so I would switch between the two, was Heirs of Grace. Got it for free on Kindle with Prime, and it basically follows a girl. She gets notified that a family member has passed away that she's never heard of, and she inherits all his money, this big house out in the middle of nowhere, and she can basically move there and live there and not have to work for a few years and figure out her life, so she takes it. It's kind of goofy, silly, and she gets there and it's not what she expected at all. There's magic, and it's kind of funny. Certain points it's just completely cheesy and ridiculous, and you kind of roll your eyes. But if you can make it through those parts, it kind of gave me the similar vibes to when I read the True Blood series, the Suki Stackhouse series, which was turned into the show True Blood. It kind of has similar, like, it's not realistic, it's not something that would ever happen, of course, and the characters are a little silly, but it's still fun to read. That's what this one reminded me of, and I really did like the audiobook. I thought the narrator did a good job. So if you're looking for something with ghosts and magic and things like that, and family drama, I recommend this one. I actually listened to it mostly while I was at the gym on the Stairmaster, and it kept me going, so if that tells you anything, it was really fun. Plus the cover's kind of fun colors, great for the season. I gave that one, let's see, I have my notebook over here, 4 stars, because it was just a little bit cheesy. And we've made it to the 9th book I read this month. So I am part of Book of the Month. I usually get 1 to 3 books from them per month, and so far loved, or at least liked, every book I've gotten until September, and that is Fashion Victim, which follows Anya, who is a character. She works in fashion and she'll do anything to get to her obsession, which is succeeding in her career and getting closer to her coworker and becoming her best friend. I did not like this book. It was a bit of a flop for me. I read other reviews. Some people were saying it was a dark comedy. Some people were saying it was a psychological thriller. I don't really care which one it was. It was bad either way. If you're really into this, I'm not going to say don't read it, because it's not the worst thing I've ever read, but it's definitely not my favorite. If it's a thriller, the sheer body count would have required a much larger investigation than was covered in this book, which just took you out of it, because you're like, there's no way this is all happening. There's no way that they don't know what's happening. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if it's a comedy, I smirked a few times in the first 50 pages, and then after that it was just really boring and repetitive. And Anya is so two-dimensional. I don't care about any of the other characters. You just want it to end, and it won't end. It just keeps going. It's not the greatest book in the world. I don't recommend it at all. I hated it. I did give it 2 stars. So just, once again, not the worst book I've ever read. The book 10 I read was In the Night Wood. It's another NetGalley pick for me. I really liked this one. So it follows a couple, Charles and Aaron. They just lost their daughter, who is 6, and they're grieving very differently. Aaron's obsessing on their daughter and drinking and taking prescription meds to try and drown out her pain. Charles is throwing himself into his work and just avoiding the topic altogether, so obviously they're drifting apart. They find out that Aaron's ancestral home in England, there are no other heirs. She is the last one, so they decide to pick up and move there and try to start over. They get there and there's this dark, twisted mystery going on. There's little girls going missing that look exactly like their daughter, and they're not talking. There's all this creepy things going on. They're each having dreams. They're each obsessing over similar things, and it's this dark, twisted tale that slowly converges together, and it's eerie, and the fantasy elements aren't there right from the beginning, but they slowly creep in, and it kind of reminded me of like a grown-up version of a Holly Black book with the Fae and the woods, and it was just, I enjoyed that it wasn't intense. It was a very subtle book, and that it slowly draws you in until this massive ending that if you read the first couple chapters you would not expect that this is where it's going. So it was, I still think about it like days later. I'm thinking about the book, and it was just beautifully written. It's not for everyone though. If you need a faster paced book, this definitely will not be it for you. But if you like slower books that happen in the real world but there's fantasy elements weaving in and out, I totally recommend this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars just because it was a little bit on the slower side, and it took me a few days to get into, and it's not very long. It's under 300 pages, so you can get through it fairly quickly. You just have to get through that first part. And finally, you've all heard me talk about book 11, probably too much at this point. It's The Tiger's Daughter. This is a Asian-inspired fantasy following 2 girls as they grow up into women. One is the future empress, and the other is her best friend, who is also a future leader. And it follows their story together as one writes the other a letter about how they grew up in their relationship and how it forms. And it is a female-female romance. It's beautifully written, and you can just read through this one so fast. Like, it's 500 some odd pages, 526 pages, I think. I read it 200 pages at a time. and that's insane. So if you are wanting to get into adult fantasy and you primarily read YA, you'll go through this one super fast. I was actually surprised. I was expecting it to be really dense because a lot of people said it was more like, it read like historical fiction as a fantasy. It goes by so quickly and it's engrossing, and the magic elements, just like the last one, aren't as prevalent. In the next book they are more so, but there are demons and gods, and it's just a really good book. I don't know what else to say. I really loved this one, and I'm reading The Phoenix Empress now, which is book 2, and it's just as good. Some things that I didn't like, or in their relationship, certain things happen at, I feel like, awkward moments where they would have been better if they'd happened later, and one of the people in the relationship tends to use the other one quite extensively, to the point where she never says thank you and just expects her to do everything, and that kind of bugged me, but it does get acknowledged eventually. It's just irritating at first. Those are the 11 books I read this month, the month of September, and so far they were all pretty good. Just a quick recap. I gave Bridget Jones's Diary 5 stars, Ragnarok Unwound 3 stars, Merciless 4 stars, Fierce Fairytales 5 stars, that one's so good, City of Lies 4 stars, The Dinosaurs 4 stars, The Darkest Star 5 stars, Heirs of Grace 4 stars, Passion Victim 2. In the Night Wood I gave 4 stars, and then The Tiger's Daughter I gave 5 stars. So I recommend you guys check these books out. I will put in the description box, I'll put the link to my blog where you can read the full synopsis and my full extended review for each book, as well as some other reviews. And so happy reading. I hope you guys enjoyed this wrap up, and I will see you again soon. Bye!